Hi, everybody. Tonight I'd like to talk about creating lists in GeoPrism Registry. In our last two videos, we talked about how to create GeoObject types and hierarchies, which are the formal structures of data in a GeoPrism registry, and how to import instance data into that GeoObject. Tonight, lists will help us see that data in a tabular form and help us understand what that data actually looks like in the GeoPrism registry. So before we get too far into this, new to what a GeoPrism registry is, go to geoprismregistry.com and you can get a bit of overview information, including features and all the open source code and ticketing for managing the project is available on GeoPrism-registry on GitHub. The official documentation is at docs.geoprismregistry.com. And the sample data that we're using tonight is all on geoprism-registry-example-data on GitHub as well. We're using the demo instance of GeoPrism Registry, which is available to you. The access credentials are on the official documentation under section 6.1 of that documentation. So let's just dive right in. Just a quick recap. We created the health center example GeoObject type, which was a point geometry type in the Ministry of Health organization and had the health facility ownership custom attribute amongst all the others. We created the health center hierarchy example hierarchy, which includes our GeoObject type that we created and the inherited administrative structure hierarchy from the Ministry of Home Affairs. Again, if you want to know more about how or why we created this way, go to our previous videos, which I link in the description. I'm going to go back to the home page of GeoPrism Registry and go to the lists and spatial data module. On the left, you can see all the GeoObject types that I have access to. Now I'm logged in as admin, so I can see all the GeoObject types, but if you were logged in as a user from a specific organization, you would only see the GeoObject types that are available to you. In the Ministry of Health organization, we can see our health center example GeoObject type right here. I clicked on it, and there's no lists created yet. So again, a list is a tabular or table structure of the data that we imported to the system. I'm going to click this Create New List button. And here you can see I can create a single, a frequency-based, or a period-based list. There's sort of a lot to cover when it comes to generating lists. We're not going to cover everything. I'd urge you to see the official documentation for more details, because there's a lot of power behind the functionality that's enabled through this modal. We're going to just choose a single list, which means we're going to have a single table represented once created. But first, we got to give it a title. So I'm just going to call this Health Center List Example, just to be clear, and give it a fake description. And you can see that this list we're creating is for the health center example GeoObject type, which is exactly what we want. And here we can see the hierarchy levels for the hierarchy that this GeoObject type exists in. So I want to include every level of the hierarchy in our list just to be complete. And I want to say that this list is valid for the first of this year, so January 1st, 2020. I'm going to ignore the filters section for now, and I'm going to ignore the metadata. Even though the metadata is incredibly important to do on a production instance, you should definitely be filling out your metadata on a regular basis for both the tabular and spatial data. One important note here is that we have a separation between list metadata and spatial metadata. Just a little example of what some differences might be. In the spatial data, you can see properties like spatial representation type and reference system. It describes the information about, or the metadata about, the geometry data, type data. But again, we're going to leave this all empty for now just to keep this quick, and click submit. So here we can see a list has been created, or a list type that has a configuration, which if I were to click on this, it's all the settings we just set. That's all. I'm going to click into this new list that we created, and here we can see at the top that there's a working version and this section for published versions, which has no published. If I click into the list section, again, there's a lot of information here or a lot of functionality that we can go through, but we're going to keep this video brief and maybe go into more detail functionality in a later. So for now, we'll click on this list link, and we can see all the data that we imported in our last example, which was 13 rows. So this looks about to be 13 rows. At the top, we can see that it's a private list. I can make this public by changing the setting in the configuration, which allows us to share this list across organizations. But right now, this list is only visible to people in my organization or within Ministry of Health. It's not specified as a master list, so this is a non-master list, and it includes the dates that it's generated and the list that the date that it's valid on. If the underlying data was updated in the system, I could choose to refresh this list or update this list from the underlying database. And I can also view this data on a map, which we're going to get into in another. I can create a new GeoObject or a new row in this table. I can also export this data. Looking at the data closer, we can see our lat-long columns. We can see our health facility ownership custom attribute that we created. And we can see the hierarchy data that we also selected on the configuration of this list. This data is filterable, so if I wanted to filter by the province star, do that. Want to, so I will do what I just did. And finally, we can export this data to either a list or a spreadsheet or the spatial data, which is a shapefile. Let's export as a list. Here we can see I have an Excel file that was downloaded to my computer, and this is the data that was exported. So it includes all our lat-long columns, all our hierarchy columns, our label and code columns, including the metadata that we actually didn't fill out but should have filled out for this list, as well as the data dictionary, which defines what the column names represent. finally, I want to give a little teaser for what we'll talk about in our next video, which is how to visualize this data on a map. So I just clicked on the View Map button, and we're in the Explorer module, which allows us to see our GeoObject data in a mapping context. That's all I have for tonight. Stay tuned for our next video, which will go further into this functionality.